You're listening to the Screeners Podcast Network.
From the big screen to the small screen and everything in between, this is the Screeners Podcast, where all media is appreciated, but none is safe.
Hello and welcome back to the Screeners Podcast. I'm Daniel.
This is Chad.
I'm Chris.
And we are here for a special, monumental, insanely big episode today, and it's mainly just because of the film that we're reviewing. It's our bonus episode covering Avengers: Infinity War. We are so excited to get right down to it. As always, we want to remind you, follow us on Twitter at ScreenersCast, like us on Facebook, search the Screeners Podcast. You know how to do these things. I don't need to walk you through it. Just do it and join in the conversation with us because we love to hear from you guys. All right, before I dive into our review, we have a special guest with us tonight, co-host of the Next Trek podcast, and my brother, Tyler Howard, is here joining us. Tyler, thanks for being here.
It's good to be here.
Hey, Tyler, of those two things, being Daniel's brother or the co-host of the Next Trek podcast, which one of those things makes you happier?
He knows the answer.
I would not be able to spend the time with Chris that I get to spend.
Right?
You know? But
That's
of course,
right.
I wouldn't know Chris if not for Daniel.
That's
you
true.
would be in an impossible,
It's a paradox.
impossible situation. Yeah.
Good answer. I was getting ready to kick you off the podcast real quick.
You know, honestly, when you were introing the movie, you said we have a big, huge. And I
I
thought
it
you
was
said because
about
we had
me, but
Tyler.
whatever. That's
Yeah.
No, definitely not. No.
Oh, okay. Oh.
No, definitely not that.
Although there is going to be some monumental disagreement, I think, about some parts of this. So
Well, let's find out. Let's dive right into our review of Avengers: Infinity War.
There was an idea to bring together a group of remarkable people. To see if we could become something more. So when they needed us, we could fight the battles
that they never could.
All right, guys, let's get right into our review of Avengers: Infinity War. The IMDb, you know what? It's all redacted anyway. Everything's spoilers on this film. I feel like what we should do is we should just go ahead and give our super short thoughts, overall, whether we recommend this movie, and then we jump straight into spoilers, simply because I think so many people are going to, get on the spoiler bandwagon and say we ruined the movie for them. So let's just go ahead and give our general thoughts real quick up front, and then we'll hop right into spoilers. So, Daniel, what did you think of Avengers: Infinity War?
What did I think?
What did you think of it?
It is a gigantic film. It's a grand scale that we haven't seen in the MCU before. It's so much to behold just because of the sheer scale of the movie. It spans the far reaches of space. It's got so many amazing character moments that really this movie is fantastic, and it's hard to hate. I have complaints that we're going to get to later, but overall, it does such a great job, a very surprising job at balancing the sheer scale of it all, balancing these literally dozens of characters that we know and love, and it has great character moments with each of them, great humor, even though this is a very dark film. It's dark, it's Shakespearean, but it manages it all with surprising amount of care, and overall, it's just a fantastic film. Thanos makes for an incredible villain, far better than I thought he would. They've been teasing him for, 5+ years, and he really makes for an incredible villain. Not only is he insanely powerful, but he's written here with genuine depth, and you really understand his perspective and understand his motivations as a character. He's easily one of the best villains that Marvel has had, and so that's fantastic. So overall, this movie is really great, and it's all topped off with an incredible third act. So I have some big complaints. I really do have a few large complaints with this movie, but we really can't talk about them until we get into spoilers. So I will withhold them till there. So overall, it's very good, but my complaints are pretty big. So we'll get to those in spoilers.
Got it. All right, Chad, what are your general thoughts on Avengers Infinity War?
Very much like Daniel, my general thoughts are the movie is good.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not great for me. I had hoped that this movie would be great with the Russo brothers directing and the ability to bring all of this together to finally get to see Thanos in action. I think they do pay off a lot of the potential, but without going into spoilers, obviously this will be the theme here. I can't really talk about my major problems with it because essentially my major issue with the movie is just how the movie is constructed and where it sits in this universe and what that means. And so when we get into spoilers, I'll unpack that a little bit. But overall, it is very funny. It is very serious at times. It has some dark themes that are explored. It has great character moments, great pairings of characters that we haven't seen together, which gives the opportunity for great comedic riffs and complementary powers in the action, which is always exciting to see, especially for the first time. It's a little long, and when we can talk about why I feel like it feels long, I think that'll make more sense because it seems counterintuitive to say that I was ready for it to end because the last act, I agree with Daniel, is so great and thrilling and visceral and just fun. But what precedes that, the 45 minutes that precedes that, for me is problematic. But overall, I'm just going to say I think this movie is really good. It's not great. And I'll just have to leave it at that.
Got it. Okay, Tyler, what episode of Star Trek did this most remind you of?
Ooh.
Well, actually, it felt like the best of both worlds. I'm not gonna lie. We're sitting there at the end, and the way that it ends is well, we'll have to talk about the ending, I guess, a little bit later. But it is, man, I actually love this movie. I'm gonna slightly disagree, I think, with Chad, and I do say that it is great. Daniel stole my words, so I'm been scrambling for another one. It is Shakespearean, it's operatic, it's truly epic in the real sense of the word, cosmically epic. It is dealing with deep themes that are that have been built up and constructed so well over the last 18 movies. Really, so masterfully paid off in so many different ways. It's heavy, but the heaviness is really tempered with humor. There's, I guess I have some small complaints, but I don't have the big complaints that I think these guys are getting to, are not complaints that I share. And I think in the end, truly it's a wonderful turning point in the universe that we've come to know and love. I know some people have Marvel fatigue, but I'm not one of them, and I'm so excited to see where the series goes from here.
Okay, yes. So let me just give my general thoughts, and then we will dive into spoilers like we said before. Here's my thought. This movie is a crowd pleaser. I saw this, I guess, like a afternoon showing on Saturday, and, it is an incredible movie to see with a packed house. IMAX 3D, great visuals and sound. It is an amazingly crowd-pleasing popcorn movie. And, there are just so many amazing moments that as a comic book fan, as a fan of the MCU so far, it is so great to see, all these characters that we are familiar with that have we've grown with over the last 10 years culminate into this, this huge adventure. So for the most part, I really had a great time with this movie. It is one of the best kind of turn your brain off popcorn flicks that has been around in a long time. But the problem I have with it is that it didn't rise above that for me. There is very little, if any at all, character development in this movie. In fact, I would say there's none. The only character that is developed in this movie is Thanos. And everything else is more of just action set piece to action set piece. And very little of it really changes anyone until the kind of final moments. And that's just unfortunate. I feel like, again, you can only do so much with these many characters, and for what they had and what they were expected to do, I think they pulled it off. It's kind of a magic trick that they pulled it off. But there's not really much more there. And, the thing that I think I am most excited about is not necessarily seeing this movie again, but seeing how it concludes. And I really feel like Marvel has done a disservice to themselves, because there's no way that Ant-Man and the Wasp is going to live up to this. I think that's going to be a huge disappointment. And Captain Marvel obviously will kind of give us, some maybe, that's taking place in the 90s, so it's a prequel as well. Both of those films are coming out before the sequel to this. And boy, I just feel like maybe they shouldn't do that. I feel like maybe perhaps that it's just not going to. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, maybe it'll turn out to be amazing. But this movie is so top of the crescendo, defining moment, that anything that comes after this that is not directly tied in is going to feel really kind of like a letdown to me. So that's the way I came across, is I feel like there's very little character development, some amazing action set pieces. It's a magic trick that no one else has been able to pull off. It really is a blast, a great crowd pleaser, but it doesn't really rise above the level of that film, unfortunately. So let's just give our basic rating system that we use here on the screeners, and that is, should you see this in the theater? Should you stream it? Or should you rent it? Should you stream it? Or should you just skip it all together? So let's see here. Daniel, what do you say? What should you do with this film?
Chris, this movie made $250 million domestic in its opening weekend.
So stupid.
Biggest opening weekend of all time. Biggest global opening weekend of all time, with over, I believe it's $630 million, and that's without China, which it doesn't open for like 2 or 3 more weeks. Everyone's already seen this movie, unless you don't like Marvel, in which you shouldn't see this movie. So, the rating system is a little pointless, but just for the sake of continuity, of course, this is the type of movie you need to see in theaters. It's big, it's grand, and it's really fun. It's a really good movie, despite the problems that I have with it, which we'll get into. It's absolutely worth seeing in the theaters because it's just so big. It'll be worth it.
All right, Chad.
Yeah, so on my scale, is it theater worthy? Absolutely it is. My problems with this movie are different than yours, Chris. I think the character development that you're looking for has happened in the previous 18 movies, and so that's just the new normal of how
Agreed.
Marvel works. And so I don't imagine there are a lot of people that are coming to this having watched none of the previous films, although that's certainly possible. So for me, the scale is it worth seeing in the theater just as a standalone film? And my answer to that is yes, it is. I didn't love this movie, but it has a lot of great moments, a lot of wonderful action, and I think it's absolutely worth seeing in the theater.
All right, Tyler.
Well, yeah, just echoing to both Daniel and Chad, this is a movie you have to see in theaters. Come on. And also, like Daniel said, everybody has already seen this, so do yourself a favor, see it again. I haven't yet. I haven't seen it a second time, so I'm looking forward to seeing it this week and just digging past the initial spectacle and digging deep. So do that. Do yourself a favor and really dig into this one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. See this movie in the theater. See it with a huge crowd of people. You've already seen it, so there it is. I mean, everyone has seen this movie, so go off and do that, because I think you'll definitely enjoy the ride. I can't wait to have this discussion with you, Chad, because I feel like we've had this discussion before, where we say a film should stand on its own and not have to be fully dependent on others that have come before it. So that's just we'll chat about it. I can't wait to hear what our thoughts are. So let's dive right into spoilers for Infinity War.
The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club.
Well, you look nervous. Is it the scars? You want to know how I got them?
There's so many places it would never occur to Hawk to hide. However, the reason the Führer's brought me off my Alps in Austria and placed me in French cow country today is because it does occur to me. Because I'm aware what tremendous feats human beings are capable of once they abandon dignity.
And in the dream, I knew that he was going on ahead. He's fixing to make a fire somewhere out there in all that dark and all that cold. And I knew that whenever I got there, he'd be there. Then I woke up.
Okay, guys, what do we want to talk about? What's on our minds?
Let me kick things off here. The biggest problem that I have with this movie is that, yes, this movie has a lot of balls for ending the movie the way they did. They ended it with Thanos completely winning, and it's a total cliffhanger. The movie just ends with Thanos smiling, having won, and that's a really fantastic ending, and we'll dive more into that. But my biggest problem is that I'm genuinely pissed at this movie for not having the balls to actually kill anyone we care about. None. I'm blown away that they couldn't kill anybody other than Loki, Gamora, and Vision.
And Heimdall.
Nobody cares about Heimdall.
I care about Heimdall.
Literally nobody cares. He's literally a pointless character played by an amazing actor for no reason whatsoever. So that's my biggest complaint with this movie. There's a moment here where Thanos stabs Iron Man, and that's a powerful moment. And I was like, oh crap! And I was starting to get emotional, and then he's fine. He's just fine. And that was the moment that really ticked me off, because I was like, are you serious? You can't actually kill anyone that we care about. You're only going to kill off little minor characters that we're not going to miss. So that really ticked me off.
That's interesting. So your theory then is that everyone who turned into dust is coming back, and those who didn't.
They
are. Of course. They are.
No, hang on. I know. But those who didn't are dead, is what you're saying. You're saying
no, not necessarily. Even Gamora, I think Loki's definitely dead, because they said it like 3 times. But Gamora could definitely come back, for sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, and that's the thing too, that this is the main issue that I had, is the MacGuffin of this thing is in the title, right? This Infinity Gauntlet, right, has the ability to turn back time. And obviously, they're not killing Black Panther because, he makes way too much money at the box office. Spider-Man, all those folks are not dead. There's no way. We already know that there's movies coming out, unless they're prequels, and they're, But here's the problem that I have, is that if they don't go back and stop World War II, then they're jerks. I don't know why they you know what I mean? So where does that stop? Once you introduce this kind of thing, for me, it became so much less interesting. And of course, they showed it off by him being able to reverse and take the thing out of Vision's forehead, right? And so we saw that moment. We know that moment's coming back so that they can, reverse everything and bring it back to this moment and defeat Thanos in this moment. But that's problematic. It just seems so strange that if that's the case, they're going to have to rewind it further and bring back all their other friends and stop Bucky from ever becoming the whatever he's called, the Winter Soldier. So I just don't understand why they did it this way. This just seems so.
You're describing a problem with any time traveling movie.
Exactly. So why do it? Why do it here? Because we all know at the end of this movie, if you're not a kid, you know what's happening next. It's not a surprise. There's nothing surprising about what's going to happen in the next film. Does anybody disagree that these people are coming back, or do we think everybody that disappeared is dead for good?
No, they're coming back. Although I think my problem is less of that. Although I do agree, Daniel, I really do wish that that one I went in expecting Captain America and Iron Man to die. They've both given their hints that they're done pretty much with the franchise. So there's that. Maybe that's why they didn't. Maybe they really thought they were being unexpected here or something.
They didn't even fake die and turn into dust.
Right.
They didn't even do that.
I know. Well, but I think that's even. I wonder if that's even why. If it's well, you thought they were going to die, we're not even giving you that. I would expect that in the next one they do, and maybe I'm just holding out hope, and that's all vain. But my issue is less of who died or who didn't die in this one. It's now we know through Captain Marvel and we're gonna have time travel. We're gonna have all these other things. It's how are they gonna wrap this up? That's more of the issue for me. That's why I have less of a problem with the ending of it, because it's way less about the ending of this ending. This is one. It is one movie. It's a part 1 and a part 2. It's got how are they gonna wrap it up.
Yeah, so for me, and I think I'm going to go a little bit down where you're sort of insinuating there, Tyler, is this movie, for me, the ending was just another it ended and I was already kind of checked out on the emotional stakes level. And what I mean by that is The problem with this movie, and as someone who has, I think, Chris, you read comics as a kid as well, but as someone who collected comics for literally 2 decades, the problem with comics is that even in short runs and things like that, the whole point of a comic is getting you to buy the next comic. And so what my biggest issue with this movie was that if taken as a standalone, it just can't support the weight of what it's trying to do at 2.5 hours. You could literally feel 30 minutes of this movie. It opens really strong, great action, that you have the construct of Thanos and the minions of Thanos now going after the stones, which the minions and the quote-unquote children of Thanos gives us a nice kind of framework for creatures to fight before Thanos actually gets into the fight. All that sets up really nicely. And then it hits like a 30 or 40 minute span where it is exposition upon exposition just to let everybody know what can happen and the stakes of what should happen. And as you get to the hour and 45 minute, 2 hour mark, you realize that this movie is not obviously going to be able to advance where it needs to. And we all know this is a part 1 and part 2. But that's my biggest problem, is that this movie, as good as it was, as good as the action was, and as ballsy as the ending was, I think that the movie is not great for me because it doesn't feel like a movie. It feels like a setup for the next movie.
It's like a transition.
It is. And so the Marvel has now become... And that's why I think some of the earlier Marvel films are really great, because we were getting introduced to these characters. And, of course, new things were coming down the road. But this is the convergence of the Avengers. And instead of it feeling like the Avengers movie, because there's a way that you make this movie and half of the people die and it feels like its own story. But to me, it really didn't, because there's such a large amount of this film is spent on setting up payoffs for the next film. And so that's why, for me, I couldn't love it, because I felt like I'm just watching part 1, and when I watch part 2, hopefully this will pay off. And so that was my biggest disappointment. And then the way that they killed people at the end really was just the cherry on top of my disappointment in that regard, because of course they're not really dead. We already have announced sequels for Black Panther and Spider-Man and all these other characters. So that, for me, I wanted to feel like, I see all these people on Facebook that are probably not as dialed into what's coming out later down the road, saying Infinity Wars, oh my God, mind blown, I can't believe it. And I just want to say, they're not dead, and so it's just disappointing for me that I couldn't feel the weight that they wanted me to feel, because it's not the thing.
Surely everyone knows they're not dead. Is there anyone, any adult that walks out of that theater thinking, oh, they killed Spider-Man?
Right. Yeah, I don't think anybody does think that.
No.
And that's why, that's the thing. This movie, I really did enjoy it. I don't want to come down too hard on it, because it really is enjoyable. But I agree, it was more enjoyable than having any actual real emotional stakes, because, I mean, the most emotional moment is probably when Gamora dies, but even so, she could come back, and furthermore, I don't give a crap that much about Gamora. She, out of the whole list of the dozens of characters that are in this movie, she's very far down on the list of people that I would care if they were for real dead. And so it's just, I just can't, I'm not that invested in this. If Iron Man died, Captain America, these characters that we've seen for, almost 10 years, that is big, and it shows that people can die in this universe, like people that we really care about. And so that would just really impress me, and I'm very disappointed that didn't happen.
Well, and yet this is still a comic universe, and like Chad was saying, I basically, anytime somebody dies in a comic book, I'm just like, well, whether we see the body or not, it doesn't matter. They're coming back in however many issues.
But that wouldn't be the case here. If Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man dies, he's gonna be dead, and that's what I had hoped for.
Yeah, and that's what was so disappointing with that speech is Thanos, I mean, the screenwriters gave you the speech, I respect you, right?
It was amazing.
It was just like, okay, game over. And you're right, I started to get a little choked up, and then, no, he's okay. Come on, man.
And so I just watched it a second time today, and because I know the outcome, literally zero emotion. His speech is meaningless because he's not actually dying. So it's just all, it really, they screwed themselves by not having any real emotional stakes.
I see I still go back to that. It's this. You guys are correct. This is set up for what comes next, and that is way more the payoff. You go into one of these movies and you're thinking, the word I used was epic. If we're thinking back to Greek tragedy or Greek theater, there's especially something that's this huge. There's a payoff that has to come, but it only can come through all of this crazy darkness, and this is the midpoint climax where it looks as though everything is lost. This is in the Iliad, and I know I'm the nerd here who's quoting Iliad, but in the Iliad there's this horrible climax toward the end, and it looks like everything is lost and something is going to come through. So I don't know, and I'm the guy quoting the Greek literature here, but that doesn't bother me. It's now, how are they going to resolve it?
The problem, though, is the Iliad is the Iliad's a single work, and this is not, right? And so I don't have to come back for Iliad Part 2 to get that payoff.
That's true, but it's two parts of one story.
Right? No, I get it, but
so that doesn't bug me.
I get it, but that's the problem. Is that cinema, in my opinion, right? And it should stand alone. It's like what Chris was mentioning earlier. I ought to be able to pick up even a part 1, part 2, part 3, whatever, ought to be a standalone. And when a movie and the movies start to become literal setups for the next thing, there will never be an ending. It will always be the next thing. That's true. And that's the problem.
This is the epitome of that. And that's why I said I have the biggest problem. That's why there's no character development. There's literally no one goes through any kind of a trial. It literally is just we're going to get these characters from point A to point B so you can see this awesome action set piece, and then at the end there's going to be this moment that you're going to not believe, and all of it is fantastic on like a level of that we've never seen before, and it really is a spectacle, but it's not much more than that. And that's what disappointed me so much about it, is at the end of it felt like, okay, I do want to see what's next, but I know on a very literal level what is going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, I understand that these characters are not dead. So that was my biggest issue here, is that it felt like the stakes really didn't pay off. Of course, we saw Thanos win, quote unquote, but the only way that is really impactful is if in Infinity War Part 2 they stay that way, and then we're really shocked, like, oh my gosh, you mean we actually did lose all these people, and they were just the movies that they've announced aren't actually coming out? They're different movies.
Now, that would be
insane.
That's true. That would be awesome.
I would tip my cap to you, Marvel, if you did that, but that's not.
And that
they're not going to.
Will not happen.
They won't do that. Well, but that's my point. Is that won't happen, and that's the only way that the ending has any bite.
But we are going to get, I imagine something like, I agree with Daniel. Now, the thing that I really, really agree with is that they completely missed their opportunity with Iron Man's death. Because I went in going like, oh, somebody's going to die, because somebody I think does have to die. I mean, at your midpoint climax in a 5-act or a 3-act structure, this is what happens. But at the same time, in Empire Strikes Back, we get Han Solo chucked in the carbonite, and we know that they are going to rescue him later on.
Yeah, but we didn't have 18 films building up to this point with Empire Strikes Back.
It's true.
We have seen Iron Man in what, 8 films,
something like
seven films, and we know his time is coming to an end, a natural end. It could have been so natural, and they missed it. And I feel like, honestly, this is like the third natural end that they've missed for Iron Man specifically. And so it's just, if none of our major characters can die in this franchise, then I am just going to totally check out, because fun action is great and there's tons of it here. But if you can't show me that somebody we care about can actually die, I'm not as emotionally invested.
All right, I think we're beating a dead horse at this point. We've kind of been making this point for the last several minutes. So let's just go ahead and move on. Is there any other criticisms you want to talk about before we move into the stuff that we liked? Because obviously I think all of us are really positive on this movie, but we're just kind of jumping into the negative right here at the beginning. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to kind of highlight before we moved on to some more of the positive points of the film?
Sure. So one minor criticism that I had was I actually... I really enjoyed seeing the Gamora little girl scene and how that's set up, and the missed opportunity there that I thought was what was intriguing to me about that whole premise is that he goes back and he distracts her. The way it's shot, all of it's really, really very well done. And then he adopts her or whatever. She becomes his daughter, quote unquote. But later on down the road, as he's explaining to others about why he did that, we find out that plan actually worked and that his genocide there saved the planet. And so I thought that was really interesting, and I wish they would have leaned into that a little bit more to make it because I think Thanos is a magnificent villain here. I think he's behind Killmonger. It's really close with both of those. Just really strong, very powerful. You start to understand a little bit, and I feel like they could have made him even a little more sympathetic if they would have just unpacked that a little bit more. And I felt like it was just kind of, but my major complaint is what we've already talked about. I think from this point forward, I'm going to be pretty positive, and that's the good news.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. Okay.
I have a couple minor complaints. Well, here's a kind of a duo, a positive and a negative kind of joined together. One thing I loved is because Thanos is such a great villain, and it's just, for the majority of this movie, it's just him, and he has 4 henchmen.
By the way, he looks amazing. I have to say, he's a fully CG character that I bought. There was never a moment where I didn't believe he was doing what he was doing. It was insane.
Yes,
really
and because he's such a strong character, strong villain, and his henchmen are really strong as well, it was very compelling because one of my biggest complaints in any Marvel movie or any superhero movie is when it's just this horde of faceless creatures, and so because there's no stakes there, they can just kill 1,000 of them and it doesn't really matter. And so for the majority of this movie, I was really into it. Oh wow, these are strong characters that are tough to defeat, and it's very interesting. They have to team up. I loved it. And then, of course, near the end, you get this horde of faceless creatures for no reason. They're just, and they don't even explain where they are, where they came from. They're just
there. Was a reason. It's for Thor to bring down that axe, and that's the reason.
Yes.
Which was awesome.
Amazing.
Cool. That was freaking awesome.
I think that was my favorite moment in the theater that I've had in a long time, because the entire theater just erupted. So it was so wonderful.
So good. And so
lightning,
it's
so
fun.
Good.
It's fun because we have those moments, but it's just it's far from interesting. But for the majority of the movie, I really loved the villain structure. But the criticism I have going towards that is I was confused as to why they leaned so heavily into the CGI characters for those henchmen, especially the character that was voiced by Carrie Coon. She looked like a human. That could have been so easily done with makeup, and instead she was done with CGI, and it looked okay, I guess.
It was
not
her
great.
eyes that were funky.
Yeah, and it seemed totally unnecessary. That could have very, very easily been played by a human. So I was very curious why they chose that. I thought that was a huge mistake.
My number one criticism, and this is monumental, and Daniel and I talked about this just a little bit. I didn't understand why the Scarlet Witch was not Eastern European any longer.
That was so weird.
I thought the same thing, and I thought, am I the only one? And then you tweeted about it, Daniel. I was like, no, okay, it's not me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it just wasn't working. I really don't think it was working.
It's funny. I was just watching. I did not a full rewatch, but I kind of thought, what are the biggest movies I can rewatch before we're watching Infinity War again, and Age of Ultron, which is not a good movie, was there, and I was like, oh, she does have a really thick accent. And I thought she pulled it off. But that's fine.
I don't think she pulled it off.
I mean,
I think that's why they had her lose it.
I think Vision just kissed her and it went away. Come on.
That's exactly what I thought. Yeah.
But so many people are responding to my tweet and saying, "Hey, she's been living in America for all these years. She could lose her accent."
1 year.
It's been it's been a couple years max. I don't know if you've met any people from other countries. They don't lose their accent within a year or two.
I don't know. I mean, I lost my accent living in the South after just 2 hours. So
yeah, you did. Yeah, you shouldn't listen to yourself. There's 2 reasons why she lost that accent. Their names are Anthony Russo and Joe Russo.
Yeah.
Because I don't think she had it really in Civil War, and I'm fairly
did she not?
I think. I mean, I don't remember her being very thick. I'd have to go back and watch it for sure, but I'm positive that they made that decision.
They just realized she was going to have more than 4 lines of dialogue in this movie and said, no, we're not going to do that.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Okay, now let's move into some positive stuff. I mean, obviously we can come back if you got some things that we think about that we didn't say. But I have to say, the whole like Thor Guardians of the Galaxy is one of my favorites, and I almost wish, and this is the problem I had with this movie. I mean, like, this is one thing I wish would have happened, was that it seemed like it could have been a movie all on its own, like Thor and Guardians out on their own doing their own thing.
I said the same thing with Ragnarok. Ragnarok should have been a crossover with Guardians.
Yeah, exactly, and so it was just so. It was brilliantly set up because Ragnarok felt so much like Guardians, and it was kind of like this, the same language they were speaking. And as soon as Thor got on to the ship, it was like, oh, of course. Now, if this would have been the same Thor that was coming from like the Dark World, it would have felt really weird and odd and totally off. But they've done a great job of knowing. I mean, this is another, Kevin Feige at his finest. These guys know what they're doing, where they're headed, and to be able to tonally shift these characters so that they, interlock together and they work is pretty fascinating. I mean, it really is an incredible accomplishment to see these characters who, just a few years ago, you say Thor and Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor fighting with, Rocket Raccoon, you'd be like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but somehow, it works, and it works really well.
Yeah,
so
there's so many great one-liners when Thor is laying on the bed, and they're like, they look at him, and what's the character's name? Batista's character. Oh gosh, for his name.
Drax.
Yeah,
Drax
says something like, "That's a man." My audience just lost its mind.
It looked like a pirate and an angel had
pirate
a baby.
angel. Yeah, it was so good. Another line that I love too is towards the end when Rocket is with Bucky, and from an action moment when he picks him up and spins him around, it was so great. And then when he walks away and he's like, "I'm gonna get that arm," I love it. It's so good. This movie
because he collects body parts.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna get that arm. There's so many, and I think that's one of the best things about this is that whereas at Thor Ragnarok, I thought it just I liked it, but it crossed a line where it was just too much attempts at humor all the time. And I think in this movie they balance it perfectly. Like, it's just one-liners right when they need to happen. It's really very funny.
Yeah, they do feel like blowing off steam. Like, we know that this is going to be difficult, so this is a moment where we're going to have a laugh. And even in the more difficult moments, there are moments to laugh. It really is. It's pretty crazy.
It's true comic relief is really what it is.
No, you're right. Yeah, it's absolutely right. Exactly. So,
and I have to tip my cap to the Russo brothers again. I mean, Winter Soldier is still my favorite Marvel film, in large part to the way that they construct the action. And so I was interested to see how they were going to do the action when it was a lot less grounded, when it was literally, anything in the universe can happen. And for the most part, I think they really nailed it. You could still tell what was happening. It was still visceral and exciting. So I think that's another thing. The action, for the most part in this film, is really great. It's really exciting.
So let me ask you guys this. What was the most surprising, I'm guessing you guys went in as much spoiler-free as possible. What was the most surprising thing to you in this film? I think most people would say that they killed off everyone. But, I mean, obviously that is surprising. But for me, it was just, it was more of a letdown because I knew exactly how it's going to get resolved. So for you guys, what would you say is the most surprising moment, or the most, like the thing that you kind of came away with from the film? Is there anything that kind of stands out to you guys?
Not necessarily a moment, but I didn't expect the film to be so set in space. I mean, the majority of this movie is not set on Earth, and that was very surprising to me. A very small amount is set on Earth, and the finale of the film is. But I really appreciated that. I had said to my wife when we were talking about what do we expect from Infinity War before we saw it, and I was worried about a few things just because there are so many characters that I was worried that they weren't going to get enough time that we wanted, and that was kind of true. But things like, I was worried that Peter Quill was going to go to Earth for the first time since he was a kid. And I was like, oh, that's a whole movie in itself. I don't want to see that just as a little tidbit in the Avengers. But they constructed it really well in that they didn't have to deal with that because it was all set on Titan or wherever it was. So I thought that was great.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have? For me, I was surprised at how brutal this movie was. It says it's a PG-13 movie. I'm not exactly sure that it is. It feels really, I mean, there's torture in this film. There's some really tough kind of like, mature stuff happening that I am just, some horror elements. It's just really an intense film, and I wasn't expecting it to be that. I honestly was expecting it much more to be a full like celebration of the 10 years, and it ended up being, really much more, much more of a, like we were saying before, a tragedy. You know what I mean? Like this movie is a tragedy to the fullest degree, and I wasn't expecting that. Like there are just some really crazy moments. Like again, Loki getting his head crushed by Thanos in the opening scene in this movie was just brutal, right? I mean, that was insane to me. I was surprised by that. I mean, I knew he could probably die, but I wasn't expecting it to be so like gruesome, and
you hear the crunch.
Yeah,
and his eyes are all bloodshot after that too. It's crazy.
Because I was thinking, like, when is a good time to but I think there's just so much emotional terror that happens in this movie that I that's what I was surprised at, is just how, and that's great for Thanos. You definitely fear him. I mean, he takes a whooping on the Hulk in the first scene in this film too, and you're like, okay, this dude is he's something real, and so. It's just an interesting, to me, it was a very interesting balance that they struck with being funny and lighthearted and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, this is a really intense film that surprised me how like emotionally terrifying, I guess it was, if that makes sense.
Building upon that, we've got this opening scene, which I loved. I think that opening scene was so perfect. We go from Ragnarok. He has just saved all of Asgard from extinction.
Yes.
And then they're all dead, except for, which I this is not a criticism. This is how horrific Thanos is. He is able to beat the Hulk. No one can beat the Hulk. He's able to beat Thor. No one can beat Thor. He kills Loki, and he kills. And I know Daniel doesn't care at all about Heimdall, but he kills Heimdall, who was a pretty, he was a bit of a badass in the last film, and he starts off with dispatching essentially those four characters, or at least emasculating them or whatever, those four characters, and this lets us know immediately this guy is somebody to be reckoned with.
And then the movie subverts itself, and he doesn't do that anymore, which is the problem.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. Yeah, he totally holds himself back for the rest of the film. Yeah, and this is crazy. Like you were just mentioning though, like they don't show Valkyrie in that scene. At the very beginning, I wonder, you know what I mean? Like if Korg,
I wonder if some got away and we just didn't see it, and we'll see that in.
Well, doesn't he only kill half though, right? So wouldn't he have left half of them?
True.
No, he blows up the ship, dude. The ship goes boom.
I guess that's true.
Yeah, no, they're everybody who's on that ship. Now, again, like, somehow, he was a Asgardian god. Valkyrie's probably similar, so maybe she could survive out in the, elements for a while too. But we'll see. That was an interesting moment for me, because I was like, man, Valkyrie's on this ship. We just got to like her, and so is Korg, who we really liked in Thor Ragnarok. It's so weird that they would just like willy-nilly just kill them at the beginning of this, but they don't show the body, so I'm guessing that means they're okay, but it's just still weird.
So one thing I think we should talk about before we wrap up is, did you guys notice, and of course this could be coming in Avengers 4, we don't know, but I didn't watch the trailer until after I saw the movie, and there's a ton of stuff in that trailer that is not in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, a ton.
Tons of Hulk.
Tons of the hero shots, like when they're running towards Wakanda, that's not in this movie. They also,
no, I haven't noticed that.
Yeah, oh yeah. They also actively subvert what you think is going to happen in the trailer versus what actually happens in the movie, which I applaud them for. I'm still not going to watch your dumb trailers, but I still appreciate it.
I did notice that there were several. I do remember now there were several moments where it looked like Thanos was in one place in the trailer, but he was actually in another place in the movie. And also he had less stones in the trailer than he does in the movie. I was like, wow, that was really amazing that they changed the visual effects for the trailer. I didn't remember that, but I didn't know there was a lot. I'll have to go back and watch those trailers again. That's awesome. I had not heard that at all or seen it or remembered. That's cool.
So while we're mentioning it, what was the deal with Hulk? I partially enjoyed that whole thing where he can't turn into the Hulk. Banner can't turn into the Hulk. I thought that was a really interesting concept.
He's too scared.
He's scared.
Yeah, but I felt like it wasn't fully explored. Like, I thought it's a really cool concept that they never really went anywhere.
Yeah, I think part of the problem too is I bought it in the mid section. In the first battle there where he was afraid to come out. But at the end, where Banner was almost beaten to death, I didn't buy it. I was like, he's got to come out at this point. I understand why they didn't, but that one annoyed me just a little bit. When Banner is that close to being killed, Hulk's coming out no matter what. So I was a little
I fully
bummed.
agree. I fully agree. That was weird. That was a strange, like, he got to keep doing that. Like, seriously, he would surely defend death versus it seems insane, but yeah, who knows? I'm sure we'll see him in the next film, and they'll explain that as well as possible. So anything else we want to mention before we wrap up? I know, obviously we're all pretty positive on this. Obviously we've talked about our negative thoughts, but I think, I
don't want us to come across too negative. This movie's really good. It's really good, and for what it is, it's very exciting. My complaint is more along the state of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how I feel like we're in full comic book mode now, and I wish we weren't so serialized that everything was just set up for something else. But even still, I really enjoyed my time at the cinema. Sold out IMAX, and people were cheering and laughing, and it's really, really very good. So I enjoyed it.
We got a question on Twitter that we could kind of maybe use to kind of wrap things up here.
Sure.
John Rivera asked us if we had any crazy theories for what's going to happen in part 2. So why don't we go? Maybe we could go around. Chris, what do you think is going to happen in part 2?
I know this is crazy. I know this is nuts. But they're going to undo all those deaths.
No way.
Yeah. And you'll notice that all the people that were left were like the original Avengers. Did you guys notice that?
Yeah, that was weird.
So I've got a feeling a lot of them are going to die so that the new ones can take their mantle and keep going. So that's my theory. They're going to take the gauntlet back, rewind time, and Captain Marvel will have something to do with that.
That's what I'm hoping for.
Wait,
that's the post-credit sequence, by the way. If you missed it, hopefully you didn't miss it. But go ahead. What did you say?
So you think that those who are left on Earth and Iron Man are going to take the gauntlet and reverse time? That's how it's all going to get reversed?
Well, see, here's the deal. Like, they set it up really well. Like, Peter Dinklage's character, by the way, was amazing, right? And so they show the fact that he made the gauntlet, which is weird. Like, as soon as they said that, I was like, why would they mention that he still has the original... What is it called? A cast? What is it called? The mold for the Infinity Gauntlet. And at the end of this movie, you can see the Infinity Gauntlet has been destroyed, right? Because it's like all charred and whatever. So they're going to go back to Peter Dinklage. They're going to make another Infinity Gauntlet. They're going to fight Thanos. They're going to get one stone at a time, and they're going to put it back together, do the reverse, maybe even just get the time stone. I don't even know. Captain Marvel will be a part of that because she's one of the most powerful characters in the MCU. They've already stated that. So she will somehow play a part of bringing that team together, stealing those stones. Dinklage put together that Infinity Gauntlet. They'll pull it back together, reverse time, and put it all back together the way it is. But they will die.
The only thing you didn't mention is I think, I don't know what happened, but Doctor Strange already started to orchestrate something.
Yes,
sure, of course.
That's what he was doing. Yeah,
he saw the one way that it could work, and so this is the one way that it could work. He chose this way, and so that's why Stark was so pissed off at him. But he didn't realize that he had seen the one option, and so this is the option that he chose in order to win.
Yep.
So, yep.
My prediction, I think for Infinity War 2, or have they named it yet? Is it just
Avengers 4?
Okay.
Yeah.
Whatever. So Infinity War 2, whatever it'll be, is I would love to say that Iron Man, that he realizes he's gotten this second lease on life. He basically should have died, and I would love to see him. He's the one that puts that stabs Thanos in the end or something like that, but dies in the doing.
Yeah, I've got a feeling it'll be a very similar moment. It'll reverse back to, you remember, I can't remember what Avengers it is, but it's the one where he sees the future, Stark sees the future, and all of his friends are dead around him, Captain America.
It's Ultron, yeah.
Ultron and all that kind of stuff. So I've got a feeling they're going to get a mirror image of that moment. We're going to reverse the time exactly where we were before, him and Thanos fighting, and then he's going to give his life for for the rest of the universe or whatever. And so Tony Stark will go out with a bang, and so will Captain America, and then we'll have a nice new leader in Captain Marvel to take on the Avengers from here going forward.
I just want blood. I want carnage. I want the Avengers dead. Wipe them all out. I'm not going to be satisfied till they're all dead. Just kill them all off.
Yeah. So
Thanos, is that you?
Instead of a theory, I'll give you my hope real quick. So my hope is that when everybody comes back, that obviously Captain Marvel is the Superman of this universe because they weren't cool enough to have the real Superman. So whatever.
It's true.
So
absolutely true.
It is true. And
Justice League couldn't handle their own Superman.
That's it. No, that's true.
I mean, could it be any more on the nose? They called it after the studio, like Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
What a
but,
dumb.
But Captain Marvel is
Detective
extremely powerful in this universe. So Captain Marvel will come back, and what I hope is that they will kill at least Iron Man and Captain America, even though I love Captain. Leave Captain alone. I love him. But I would hope that they would kill at least 2 or 3 major characters to clear the way for the next phase and kill them for real so that it'll actually feel like it's worth the whole journey.
Major ones. Iron Man, Captain America. Don't kill off...
You can't kill Hulk. You can't kill Thor.
Yes. What I fear is that they kill somebody like... even like Black Widow, and that would suck. That would be emotional to see her die too. But it's not big enough. It's
got to be Captain America or Iron Man. It's got to be.
It just really has to be.
It's got to be. And they can die in the in a heroic way, whatever. But they've got to go. They have to go to make it worthwhile.
Yes.
Yep. There you go. There's our predictions. Did anybody else have any before we wrapped things up?
I predict that the next DC movie will also be terrible. No, it won't be. James Wan, Aquaman. He's going to do it. I have hope.
Oh, I'm so excited for Aquaman.
You know what I kept thinking throughout this movie? That Avengers Infinity War looks and feels like everything DC has been trying to do. It's big, it's dark, it's Shakespearean, it's all so much CGI. Like, this felt like everything they wanted to do, except Avengers did it well. And
I had more feels,
better acted.
Yeah, everything. I had more feels in the first 5 minutes than I've had in all of the former DC movies put together.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this discussion of Avengers Infinity War. We will be back. Thanos will be back to discuss the sequel, I'm sure, over the next couple of years. It's next summer, right, guys?
Next summer,
right
1 year.
May 5th or something like that. It's in May.
Okay, good. We don't have to wait that much longer. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the Screeners Podcast. Please join us next time. We're going to be talking about something awesome. I'm sure the summer's here. There's so many options, so we can't wait to get back to you next time. Hey, listen, you can always check out the Next Trek podcast. Tyler and I co-host that together. We have a lot of fun. Follow us at The Next Trek on Twitter. We're always active there. Looking forward to seeing you guys next time on The Screeners. Follow us on Facebook, and we'll talk to you guys in the next one.
And that's a wrap. You've heard what the Screeners had to say. Now you be the critic. Head over to screenerspodcast.com and let us know what you think. See you next time.